Welcome, jury. I am Dana M. Hendershot, lead prosecutor of Hendershot, Marshall and Associates. And I am happy to introduce to you today our witness, Nicodemus. We appreciate your appearance in this trial as a scholarly witness. Now, let me explain to the jury that Nicodemus is an important witness. He appears, unlike any of our other witnesses, as an objective observer, an expert of the law, a man capable of reason, to separate fact from emotion or wishful thinking, unlike Matthew or the crippled woman. Nicodemus, a Pharisee, a member of the Sanhedrin, the Jews' highest governing body. The Sanhedrin was made up of 70 priests and scribes and Pharisees and distinguished lay people. Their president was the highest priest, and they decided matters of religious laws and civil disputes and that fell underneath the religious law. Now, he is retired from that body. Do I have all of that correct?
Yes, we were the court of highest appeal, and I had always believed that we were objective and fair. And yes, I guess you could say I've retired. I felt I had to leave them after the way things were handled at Jesus' trial.
Now, we are sure that before such an esteemed body, Jesus received a fair hearing. But before we get into that, would you please tell us how you came to know about Jesus and whether or not you've ever met him personally?
I had heard of him, of course. There was talk of his miracles that he had performed. His teachings, mostly concerning God's love, were attracting attention. His strange charisma made people feel he could peer into human hearts. But the first time I ever saw him in action was the day before Passover, when he caused a stir at the temple.
Oh, was that due to his radical preaching?
No, this was different. This incident showed a side of Jesus most people had not seen. I had just come from the court proceeding when I saw him. He was looking at those who sold sacrificial animals and money changers in the cathedral. A look of untethered rage came over him, like God himself was offended. I never approved of the temple court being used as a storefront myself. It was tradition. Besides, it brought in money. But Jesus didn't care about tradition or economics. He made a whip of some rope and drove the merchants out. He was furious, but it was a fury that comes from deep-seated zeal for God. There was an argument before and afterwards between him and some of the leaders over his authority in the temple. I guess it was his response to their challenge. Destroy this temple, and I will build it up again in 3 days. That led me to do something I'd never dreamed of doing. You see, his words didn't make sense, but there was something in the way he said them that made me want to hear more.
His words didn't make sense. So you had the guards bring him before the Sanhedrin.
No, actually I found out where Jesus was staying and I went to see him. He stirred something inside me. I didn't know what. I had to talk to him. At the same time, I did have a position to maintain and felt it best not to be seen. So I snuck to him under the cover of darkness. We shared a strange discussion that left me with even greater inner struggles.
Did he explain his actions at the temple or what he had said about the temple? I mean, did he give some new interpretation of the law?
No, it was something more personal. I'd hardly begun the usual amenities when he told me I must be born again. I couldn't believe my ears. This man was considered to be a wise rabbi, and here he was asking me to do the impossible. Even the most ignorant shepherd knows that a person can't return to the womb and be reborn. It was senseless.
Senseless, reborn. Did you point that out to him? Perhaps the defense will change Jesus' plea from, not guilty due to insanity.
Yes, I questioned what he'd said. I explained that the man of my age could hardly go through the birth process. He explained that he wasn't talking about physical rebirth. He was talking about the spiritual rebirth that Christians would eventually come to call baptism. He went on to say that since I couldn't understand his teachings when he related them to commonly earthly teachings, how could I understand the deeper truths? He wished to share. There was an odd change at this point. He stopped speaking for himself. He dropped the singular pronoun and used we. He was speaking for himself and God. He gave as his authority that he had come from heaven. He spoke of being lifted on a pole in the same way that Moses lifted the serpent in the wilderness so that our ancestors could be saved. He claimed that those who believe in him would also be saved. He said that God had sent him as an act of love to save people, not to condemn them. He said that people must leave the darkness of disbelief and evil and come into the light of God's truth. Oh, I wish I had understood then what I know now. I wish I'd seen what in that brief moment Jesus was saying, that I hadn't just come out of the darkness of the night, but out of the darkness of sin and into the light of truth. He was inviting me to the joy of eternal light. I might have defended him.
He spoke for God. You're not saying that you're won over by all this talk of rebirth and love. You already testified that it was nonsensical. Surely reason dictates that Jesus was just another raving fanatic, stirring up people and endangering the peace of Jerusalem.
It seemed unreasonable then, and it took me too long to see that the light Jesus had invited me to step into that dark night. Perhaps if I'd been less determined to be rational, more open to this faith of spirit that was planting in my heart, I could have reasoned with my colleagues at the Sanhedrin. I might have persuaded them to give Jesus a true hearing. But I came into the light too late. He was condemned and crucified. He was crucified. God was crucified. In the end, all I could do was see that he got a decent burial.
Nicodemus. I am truly shocked. I was certain that a man of your learning and intelligence would not have been taken in by this Jesus. You know what? You're dismissed. And no wonder why you had to retire from the Sanhedrin.
You know what finally convinced me, made me a believer? When I looked at Jesus hanging on the cross and realized everything he told me that dark night has indeed come true. That he was going to die to save us, save me. His words came back to me then, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. That kind of love and sacrifice doesn't make sense. But that love is what my heart, everyone's heart, truly cries out for.
Poor, deluded man. He's let something get in the way of his rational thinking. He actually believes in this Jesus. Court is dismissed.